Hi folks, welcome back to the channel. I received a message yesterday from one of the viewers basically saying, look, really like the videos, good stuff. I'm really new to fly tying and I don't know a whole lot about materials. Can you explain some of the stuff you're using and its application? So that's what we're going to be doing just now. I've got a whole bunch of stuff sitting in front of me. We're going to cut through it and see where we go. So we'll be starting off with some tools, we'll be moving on to thread, tinsel, that sort of stuff. Then we'll move into capes, so feathers from a cape perspective, other feathers, furs, synthetics, and anything else that we come up with, and try and cover off some terminology along the way. So let's get stuck into it. So folks, starting us off with the tools side of things, going to keep this hopefully quite concise and brief, so we'll just cut through this. I will upload pictures that you can hopefully see around the place as we go, but let's get on with it. So bobbin holder, you put your thread in that and that's how you feed the hook when you're tying the fly, quite self-explanatory. Scissors, cut stuff. Dubbin loop spinner, so a little bit more specialised. When you make a dubbin loop, you might have seen me do it in some of the videos, that's how you spin it up. Little tool for threading the bobbin, so getting it through the bobbin holder, really useful. Dubbin brush, obviously you can use Velcro or even an old toothbrush, a cut down toothbrush would work. We've then got the whip finish tool. Again, you get different styles of these, different sizes. Again, really helpful, but you don't necessarily need one. You can just come in and do some hitch turns and that'll get you there. Sort of dubbing needle, all purpose, quite helpful, useful stuff. Hackle pliers, I talk about these quite a lot. It basically extends the stem of the hackle that you're tying in. Sometimes you're trying to get a final turn in or use a small feather, and this will give you more leverage, so certainly good to have one of those. And the last actual tool that I'm going to talk about is the hair stacker, so certainly you're doing dry flies, deer hair, etc. You definitely want to have one of these. Sticking in with this sort of realm, we're going to move into hooks, beads, etc. So you get all sorts of different hooks in different sizes and stuff. So you get, you know, barbless, kind of more still water based size 10, which is a pretty staple, through to, you know, stuff for salmon flies, so double sizes that are barbed, and then slightly bigger sizes. I would say the sort of average is between a sort of size 10 and 14. 8 and 6, you're starting to push up into the larger sizes, and anything above that, you're probably hunting for sharks, and that's fine. Anything below 14, yeah, that's getting into the small sizes, down into, you know, 16, 18, all the way down to the 20s. As far as beads go, you get a whole range of different beads for, you know, single and double hooks. These are just some brass 33mm. You get tungsten, you get all sorts of different colours. You get dumbbell eyes, which again a little bit bigger. These are 5mm, and then also you can get, you know, chain link stuff for creating a dumbbell as well. You know, you get these from your local hardware store, a little bit cheaper than the sort of painted actual eye version. And also the stuff that I talk about quite a lot, you know, you've got your varnish and super glue. Don't have any UV resin because, as I've mentioned in a few videos now, found out the hard way that I'm allergic to that stuff. So really whistle stop, but that's a sort of introduction to tools, hooks, beads and glues. Hopefully that's useful. Let's move on. So moving on to threads, tinsels and wires. there's a lot of different variety in this space. So you've got, like say your black uni 80, which I use religiously, and stuff like the Vivus 140, which is also really good. You get lots of different threads for different application of threads. So the uni 80 is a rounder thread, whereas if you went to something like a UTC 70, that's quite a flat thread, so you would use that for something like a buzzer pattern, for example. Taking a look at the wire side of things, so you get all sorts of different wires. So you get really small and even smaller than that French wires come in gold and silver and the like. Or you can get stuff like the coloured UTC, which typically the coloured wire, you do get some variants, but they're typically in one sort of size, certainly the stuff that I'm using. Application wise, predominantly to hold in hackles, create ribs on stuff like buzzers, nymphs, etc., and certainly on bigger lure patterns as well. Moving on to the tinsel side of things, again, tinsels are highly variable in how you can use them, from the back end of a fly to create almost like a butt section or a tag, to ribs on nymph patterns, through to actually palmering the whole fly, so covering the whole body, which you might do on something like a cormorant fly. Again, highly versatile. You could even use tinsels on buzzers to create the wing buds. Come in all different sizes, typically small, medium, large, different applications, different colours. Certainly good to have a good range of these if you can. A sort of halfway house between a wire and a tinsel is your oval tinsel. So again, these come in different sizes, but a little bit thicker typically, give you certainly a different look and feel to the fly. You can certainly tie very similar patterns with a wire, but also with an oval tinsel. So you might see different variants depending on what it is, but again, has a similar application. And lastly, in the sort of thread family, if you like, is the floss side of things. So you see a lot of different flosses. This is a uni chartreuse that we're looking at. Glow Bright floss is really popular, again used to create butt section, tag sections, but also used on a whole range of different flies, from trout to salmon and sea trout. Usually very colourful in nature and quite a thick fibre, but certainly useful. Okay, moving on to the capes side of things now. Disclaimer up front, capes can be an absolute minefield and have very many different applications. There's lots of ifs and buts, maybes, do's and don'ts. So quite often it can be a trial and error side of things, and also learn from others side of things. But let's maybe cover off some basics up front. So we'll start with quite an easy one. So jungle cock cape, use these to create eyes on trout and salmon flies typically. So that's quite easy. We've got a genetic cock cape. So you use these for large streamers, lures, and use some of the smaller fibres as well for dry flies potentially. A more natural cock, so bit smaller, slightly different shaped feathers. I typically use this for dry flies predominantly. Certainly you can also use fibres from most capes as well to create tailing and the like for small nymphs. Moving on to, so it's a Chinese cape. So it is a cock cape, but it's Chinese, and the interesting thing about this type of cape is it's a little bit softer, so it's not as firm as this, so it'll have a bit more bend and flex, but it's not quite as soft as the likes of a hen cape. So if you want the fibres to be less spiky and you want them sitting back a little bit more and a little bit more rounded and whole, the Chinese cape might be more what you're looking for. So moving on to the hen cape, it's a badger hen cape. So this is really soft, really good for wet flies, really good as a front hackle as well on some of your more traditional wets, or on something like a small cruncher. Again, the reason it's called a badger is because it's got the dark bit in the middle and a different coloured fibre on the outside. But again, you can get a hen cape that is a bit more standard and is just, you know, the same colour as something like this. Now what's interesting is if you do that comparison with, you know, what we've just looked at in this hen cape versus something like this, which is a rooster cape. It's similar, it's got that dark bit in the middle but yellow on the outside, but a very different sort of application. So as I said, it is a minefield. My recommendation would be, if you're looking to tie a certain type of fly, you don't know which type of fibre to use as far as the cape goes, ask someone, that be in your local tackle shop, or ask someone online and they'll certainly give you a viewpoint depending on what the type of fly is that you're trying to tie, and also the size of the fly that you're trying to tie, because it might depend. If it's a bigger fly, for example, you might want to use a Chinese rooster hackle, or if it's smaller you might decide to go with the hen because it'll give you a different looking profile. Last one that I want to cover off in the cape section is the grizzle hackles. So you get lots of different ones of these, different colours, all sorts of stuff. Really versatile. You can use these as almost a whole hackle on big streamers, you know, intruder patterns, that sort of stuff, or you can use these as body ribbing for something like the humongous fly, or even using the smaller fibres for you know, sort of parachute style wolf type patterns. So that's a very quick whistle stop into capes. It is a minefield, really interesting, lots of different styles. I would certainly do some research before buying anything, especially buying anything expensive, if you've got a particular pattern in mind that you're having to purchase for. One of the options you've got also is to get some smaller select fibres from the likes of vineyards, and you don't have to buy a whole cape, and that way you can learn a little bit more about how that fibre applies to the flies you're tying without a big outlay up front. So moving on to other feathers, there's lots and lots of other feathers. So you've got, you know, the pheasant tail, which doesn't really need a lot of explaining in its application. The pheasant tail nymph, but again, you can use pheasant tail for a whole lot of different things. Really versatile. You can effectively tie a whole fly with just this, a hook and maybe a bit of wire. You can also use it for horns on dry flies, all sorts of stuff. Really interesting, very versatile, worth having. We've also got some CDC here, so very much used in dry flies, under wings, emergers, that sort of stuff. This stuff floats, is basically the short side of it, worth having. I've included strip quills because they're effectively part of a feather, even though it doesn't look like a feather here, but used for the ribbing on buzzers and nymphs. So again, quite useful. Goose bites, particularly used for wing buds on, you know, small wet type patterns, buzzers, cormorants, that sort of stuff. Peacock herald, again, really versatile, can be used on stuff like big salmon type patterns, you know, such as the sunray shadow, through to, you know, the body on small dowbacks and alike. I've got partridge feathers, so moving into kind of smaller soft hackle type feathers, you get a whole lot of different partridge, a lot of different feathers, really nice different patterns on this. Gives a really nice, you know, aesthetic to a fly, and also how it sits really good to couple with other feathers like cock hackles when you're tying something like, you know, the dry fly grunter, for example. You get coq de leon, which again, really popular feather. Quite often use this as tailing in a dry fly. Then you've also got golden pheasant tippet, which, yeah, it is a feather. You'll see this on a lot of the traditional wet flies. So even, you know, one of the first flies that they teach you to tie, you know, the black pennel, this is the tailing for that. But you also see some of this on, you know, some of the more extravagant salmon flies, like, you know, the Ian Bain Special. Granted, it's a dyed version of it, but that's part of the wing on that fly. And then moving on to some of the, let's say, the softer feathers. So, you know, the one that you would expect to see, you know, marabou. This stuff's used in all sorts of things, but in particular, a lot of the still water lures, the tailing fibre will be marabou, and then you also see it on the wing as part of a cormorant fly quite often. So appreciate that's not every feather known to man that we use. You know, we're not off talking about bits of parrot or that sort of stuff, but that's a bit of a whistle stop into some of the stuff that's used and its application. So moving on to hair, again, this also can be a little bit of a minefield, and this isn't going to be, you know, the most comprehensive coverage of hair for flies ever, but hopefully we can cut through a couple of bits and pieces. So I've broken this down into some little subsections. So we'll start with the simple stuff. So we've got some hare's ear dubbing, and then I've got, you know, the little box that I like using quite a lot with a natural squirrel and hair in it as well. Again, used in a lot of wet flies and a lot of dry flies as well, actually. Again, dubbing it onto the thread and winding it around the hook to create the body is typically how this is used in its application. Moving on a little bit, you know, we've got other hairs. We've got rabbit, which again comes in a zonker strip, where you'd probably cut the strip and use it as part of a lure pattern, for example. But also you can cut this away and use it as the wing for something like a cormorant fly. But you've also got Arctic fox, which is another hair fibre, which is quite often found in a lot of salmon flies, but does have an application into, you know, trout flies. If you want to go down that road for some of the wet flies, it is useful. Also, we spoke about squirrel on the stuff in the box, but you also get squirrel as part of a whole tail, and again, you'll use this as different parts of a fly, from underwing to tailing to the actual wing itself. So again, a range of application. Then you've also got stuff like goat, which predominantly you'll see on salmon flies, so stuff like a monkey type pattern, or a temple dog style fly, so it's got a big long tail coming off the back of it. You'll see stuff like goat. Moving on a little bit, bucktail, very standard in salmon fly tying, willy guns, that sort of stuff. Again, used to wrap around or form part of the cascade tail. Yeah, very standard in that type of pattern. And deer hair, so very standard in sedge patterns, elk hair, caddis, when you don't have elk hair. Yeah, good application in that space. What's really good about this also, folks, is there's a fur that usually sits in round about these little patches. Don't throw it out, it's really good dubbing. So if you want to try something different, you don't want to use, you know, the hare's ear or the squirrel, definitely try and use the under fur dubbing from your deer's hair. Last part that I want to cover off from a hair perspective is you get a lot of synthetic fibre as well in the hair side of things. So this is a substitute for seal's fur. Very similar, but it is a synthetic fibre. you'll see stuff like this kicking around. So this is a craft fur. I use this for bonefish saltwater patterns. Really good. It's a really long fibre. It's a little bit similar to goat, but it's softer. Has an under fur that you can comb out. Again, also makes a nice dubbing. Useful stuff. And you also get stuff like SLF from Davy Watton and all sorts of mad colours. It's a really nice colour. And then you have the likes of your ice dubs that are coming from Hairline, which again has a whole range of applications. You can mix it with different things. But yeah, used as a dubbing onto different flies. So appreciate again, really quite whistle stop, but that is an overview of some of the hair fibres that are out there. So folks, the last section I want to cover off is a bit more about the synthetic side of things. So you've got FlexiFloss, use this on buzzers, body material for cormorants. You can wrap this, you can do all sorts of stuff, you can create legs with this. Really useful to have some. Similarly, you get crazy legs. Again, you can put these on all sorts of patterns, from beetles, dries, through to streamers, to bonefish flies. Yeah, you can get these whole range of colours as well. You get sheet foam. Again, use these to create foam flies and as part of different dry fly patterns as well. Similarly, booby eyes, which are, you know, cut from bigger foam cylinders. Again, come in a whole range of different colours. Then you move on to the likes of your chenilles and fritzes, and also egg materials. These are typically tying blobs, fabs, boobies, egg patterns, that sort of stuff. Things that you'll fish as part of a washing line, under the indicator, that sort of thing. Really good to have some of those types of patterns, certainly in the winter months or when it's hard fishing. And lastly, a whole bunch of flash, because you can't go wrong with flash. So you get flash-a-boo, you get mirror flash, you get crinkle flash, you get mirror flash, you get a whole lot of flash. Again, fairly whistle stop. There's 3 tons of synthetic stuff, and that's just half of it. Get what you need, but don't go over the top would be my recommendation, certainly at the starting point. So folks, appreciate that was all fairly whistle stop. I've got a whole mess in front of me now that I'm really looking forward to putting away. Hopefully that's useful to some people. If you've got any questions, if you've got any different viewpoints and applications, drop it in the comments. It'd be great to hear from you. Hopefully it's giving you some use and value. Until next time, cheers.